Welcome to the J-Max Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Maxwell, and today I'm joined by pro bodybuilder John Meadows. So John, I'd love it if you could tell everyone who you are and what you do.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
No problem.
I've been in bodybuilding itself for a long time. I mean, I competed in 1985.
85,
so
nice.
That was my first show. So I'm going on 45 years old. I'll be 45 in April. I just tell you that because I've kind of been around a long time. I've seen a lot. I am a pro. I competed. Oh man, I lost track of how many times I did pro qualifiers before I actually won one. I want to say probably, 16 pro qualifiers before I actually won one. I actually spent a lot of time in the corporate world, which some people don't know. I was at JP Morgan Chase for a decade, and I was a VP there, and I worked in retail banking, and I ran the really large retail projects, most of them having to do with the branches. And I was doing that, and I was coaching people and competing at the same time. So essentially, for a lot of years, I was doing two jobs. And, and then I had my twin boys in 2008, and at some point, it was just like, you know what? Because I was literally working, 70, 80 hours a week. And at that point, around 2011, I was kind of like, you know what? I'm going to blank, and my kids are going to be grown up, and I need to pick a career path. I need to just drop all the coaching and training that I was doing. And I was coaching a lot of people, or drop working at the bank. And so anyways, long story short, I ended up going into this industry full time in 2012. And I'm involved in a number of different things. I just started my own supplement company, Granite Supplements, and we actually just launched last weekend.
Very cool.
We just had an awesome launch in New York, the Natural Body Inc. store in Queens. Next week we have a big event in Nutrition Zone out in California. I have a lot of really big stores and chains that back me. They appreciate what I'm doing in the industry. And so it's I feel like we're off to a good start. And, now it's just kind of taking care of people. The products are phenomenal. So it's just kind of taking care of people, and building good relationships, and that's true in any business, anything you do. A lot of it just boils down to relationships. And certainly there's a lot of get-rich-quick schemes and things like that people in our industry participate in. But, I've been around a while, but I'd like to continue to be around for a while. So, and that's just the way I like to do business. I just appreciate the value in relationships, and that's what drives life, man. I mean, if you don't have a lot of great relationships and love and good people around you, then, it's kind of a hollow life. It doesn't matter how many cars you have or how many private jets you're flying on. If you have a kind of an empty life, it's not really worth it. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of my focus is I'm getting this business off the ground. I'm still coaching many pros and my family, right? So my two kids, I have twin boys that are 8 years old, and my wife who's been with me since 1997. So that's kind of the quick synopsis.
I like it. That's pretty cool how you transitioned from the banking world to bodybuilding, and obviously you seem very happy with it. But I remember I was reading something by you a couple of years ago, and you said you were a big fan of Tom Platz. I was wondering if you could tell me the story behind that.
Well, people ask me all the time, like, who did you idolize? And in the bodybuilding world. Mm-hmm. And really, Tom was like literally the only guy that I wanted to emulate, because he was he had this rare combination of intelligence, incredibly intelligent. I mean, he can tell you about sarcoplasmic reticulum and Golgi tendon thresholds and all that stuff. He's an extremely intelligent guy. And he had the ability mentally to just take himself to a level in training that nobody else really can. Just a level of pain tolerance and ability to just dig in. So he had this unbelievable passion for training. And I had that passion when I was really young. That's why I started so young. I didn't start training and competing to impress girls or because people were picking on me. I just generally loved bodybuilding. I mean, it was literally here. It was in your blood. It was in my blood my whole life. And I actually 3 years ago actually went out to spend a week with Tom, and got to train with him every day, and then we'd go to have breakfast and talk, and it was really cool. It was really cool. I was just such an amazing feeling. I was sitting there thinking, I'm sitting here having breakfast with someone who I've really adult life, and it was a really cool experience for me.
That's awesome. And what was the biggest thing you think you learned from him?
Well, with Tom, I mean, he had his training methods were very different, right? He had a way to push himself just beyond failure. I mean, there is a lot of things that I do that I learned from him. Like, for example, I do a lot of full range leg curls, and then on the last set, might throw in 20 or 30 partial reps. Just torture, burn, unbelievable pain. And I never saw anybody extending sets on a leg curl, doing partials on iso holds and all that stuff. I learned that directly from Tom. And, he was doing that when he was training. And he would throw in, like negatives and then some partials. I mean, he would wrap up every high intensity technique into like one set. And so I'm kind of known for my legs too. And I adopted a lot of his high intensity techniques, and they really worked well. And I've had, over the years, I've had so many people that like, man, my hamstrings have never looked this good. They've never, felt like this. And so, his training techniques, particularly his ability to withstand pain and just push through, which ultimately, when you're talking to somebody about reaching their genetic potential, because most of the people I deal with are very high level, not all of them, but most of them are. And when you're dealing with people like that, it's not easy to put another 5 pounds of muscle on them, for example. You can get a beginner and intermediate, and as well as I do, it's really not that hard to put a little bit on them. But when you talk about someone who's already elite, like, man, how do I get another 5 pounds of muscle on that person? And that's what's difficult. And I always felt like you had to be really intelligent with your training to do that. I always felt like you had to just take your body to an unnatural state of pain tolerance. And, I'm not saying every set you do, but a couple sets every workout should be at that level.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually you got to kind of pull back and let your body recharge. I'm a big believer in pulling back and resting and taking periods where you back off. Because it's that old saying, one step back, two forward, right? And then you really recharge, and then you can go hard again. Hard, 6 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks, whatever it is. So anyways, that's my thought.
That's cool. So did the way you train your calves, was that influenced by Tom as well? Or was that by someone else or your own experience?
No, not really. My calves, I actually had awful calves growing up, but I did have good upper legs. So I remember competing when I was young, and I remember being very frustrated. So what I did was, I was so mad, I went to the gym and I trained them first every single workout, and they started to grow. And then I got away from it, and they would shrink again. But every time I went back to train them every workout, whether it's at the beginning or the end, I had really good results. And I always logically felt like the stretch part of the movement is what you should really be focusing on with calves, because you're walking around your feet all day. So they're kind of going up into that contracted position to a degree, but they're not used to coming out of the stretch. And I always felt like if you really work the stretch, and that's the other thing, most people bounce out of the bottom, right? So they're not really working the stretch, they're just bouncing out of it. But if you really control the weight and you really try to increase the weight and work on progressive resistance with calves and coming out of the stretch and doing it like literally every day you can, I feel like that's what can really, really just give you some really good results with calves. So I kind of adopted that. I've been doing that for years, and sometimes I'll get lazy and I'll could train them for a week or 2 or 3 weeks, and they shrink down, and I get back on them every single day, and 2 weeks later, bam, they're back.
So what you're saying is you still have to train your calves basically every workout.
Yeah, I do. People are like, oh, you have great genetics in your calves. That's the only reason why you have calves. I'm like, no, I don't. I can stop training them and show you in 2 weeks, and you'll see when an inch disappears. It's crazy. I mean, it is largely a muscle that's largely dependent on genetics, but not all the way. I mean, you can still develop your calves really well if you just train them intelligently and put a lot into it. It's just, I think most people, they're an afterthought. They just do a couple easy sets, and then they just kind of like, they don't see their calves growing. It's like, well, if you train the rest of your body like that, it wouldn't grow either. Mm-hmm. So people just don't really put any focus on it. And in bodybuilding, it's been frustrating to me because they don't even judge on it anymore. I mean, I've been to shows where I had legitimately, probably some of the better calves in the show, and it just never mattered, and it's real frustrating. But I keep pounding them anyway. It's kind of a pride. It's kind of a pride thing for me. I like to have good calves.
Well, I think your fans appreciate that too, because I always look at guys with calves, and I always thought you and Ben Pekulski were guys that really stood out with just awesome calves.
Yeah, Ben's got some big ones too. There's I remember when I was probably about 17 years old, and I remember seeing. Actually, you know what? I was a little older than that, because I remember Flex Wheeler coming on the scene, and I saw him guest posing in Cincinnati. I was at a show down there, and I remember him walking up the steps in front of me, and he had his calves looked like he had like base on them, and they were chiseled. And that was the first time I'd seen a really phenomenal pair of calves. Mm-hmm. And I just remember thinking, wow, that's a whole nother level. It didn't look human to me. It didn't look possible. But I remember being blown away by that. And then, of course, I saw Mike Matarazzo came on the scene even later. A guy from Boston. Mike had awesome calves, just crazy calves. And when I saw his calves in real life, I was like, man, I can't imagine calves can get any better than that. But I was always like fascinated by those guys, because when you look at them, when you see them in real life, it just doesn't even look humanly possible. It just like, there's no way. It just doesn't even look human. And that always, in some ways, it made me just want to quit. And in other ways, I guess it kind of inspired me.
That's cool. One thing that I noticed too is you've really changed shoulder training for me, specifically when it comes to the rear delts too. Can you explain your approach to shoulder training?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was in my early 20s, I thought you did slide laterals and overhead presses. That's all you need for big shoulders. And I didn't have very, very good shoulders. And this guy came along in the gym, Crazy Nick. This guy was just psychotic when it came to rear delts. Like when you I trained with Nick for a while, and you never did less than 30 reps on rear delts, and most of your sets were 60 reps. And so I'm playing around with these rinky-dinky weights, doing sets of 30 to 60, doing rear raises, with dumbbells or in a machine like the reverse pec deck. And the next thing I know, I've got rear delts, and they actually look pretty thick. And everybody was like, oh, man, you must be really doing some heavy presses lately. And I was like, no, actually, I've been doing sets of 30 to 60 with rear delts like twice a week. And they were like, really? So, of course, you can't base your theories just on what works for you. So, a lot of people over the years, I've had them do rear delts, side raises as the bulk of their shoulder workouts with, kind of minimal pressing here and there, but not real frequently. And these guys, they get great shoulders. And I've always said that I love incline benches. I love incline benches. And I've always said that you get a lot of shoulder thickness from those. Like whenever I drop incline barbell presses from my program, my shoulders lose noticeable size. It's crazy how they can look noticeably worse just from not doing one exercise. But they do. And the other thing I noticed for me was with all the overhead pressing when I was doing it, I'd frequently have really painful rotator cuff problems and I just had all kinds of shoulder stability problems. It never felt right for me. And I think a lot of people are that way. A lot of people, when they really do overhead presses over and over and over, um, they have problems. And it's really hard when you have a lot of mass on your shoulder girdle to maintain that, that external rotation, the flexibility, the all the things that you need to maintain. It's just really hard. The bigger and thicker you get, most guys, they reach a certain size, and then all of a sudden they have to squat different because they can't even get their arms in the same place on the bar, around the bar.
Yeah.
So I always just felt like lateral raises done with higher reps, to where it would feel like a swarm of hornets stinging your shoulders. It would hurt so bad. And when you feel that pain, when it hurts that bad, then you knock out another 10 or 15 to where you almost have tears in your eyes. That's what I always felt like would just put crazy shoulders on people, and little to no risk of injury at all. So your shoulders stay healthy. I'm 45. And sometimes my shoulders get a little banged up, but I'm still doing my incline presses. I still do all the crazy shoulder work. And but yeah, so really a lot of my strategies came from Crazy Nick. This guy used to make me, he'd cuss at me, man, your rear delts, Johnny, they just suck, and all this stuff. But I find that muscle, when you really focus on it, I find it to be easy to develop. You just got to stay on it. That's all. And I think most people, it's like calves almost, just as an afterthought. They might maybe do a couple rear delt, a couple sets of 10 or something when they're done. Or they do it and they use exercise forms, nothing but traps and rhomboids and lats doing the work instead of the rear delts, which is common too. But I find that muscle to be, I've always been kind of infatuated by rear delts, hamstrings, and calves.
Mm-hmm.
And like my friends always laugh at me. They're always like, when you quit retiring from everything, you're just going to come in and train, and all you're going to do is rear delts, calves, and hamstrings, aren't you? They're like, that's literally all you're going to train. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? There's a possibility of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did he get that nickname, Crazy Nick?
Well, this guy did a powerlifting and bodybuilding contest in the same day. He did that a couple times. Back in the 90s, there used to be a ton of contests in Ohio, powerlifting and bodybuilding. It's not so much like that now. Mm-hmm. But back then, there were, constant shows. So we'd have a powerlifting show in Columbus and a bodybuilding show in Columbus on the same day. So he would do prejudging. He'd drive over to where the powerlifting meet was across town, put on his powerlifting gear. He'd deadlift. He was a really, really good deadlifter. And he would deadlift and, do the rest of, benching. And then he'd come back for the finals in bodybuilding, wipe the chalk off, put some oil on, and compete on stage at night. And it was crazy. Him and a couple of his buddies did that. So we always called him Crazy Nick because we never seen anybody do that before.
Yeah, that's pretty insane. I can't even imagine doing that.
Yeah, I definitely can't imagine doing that.
So, it's kind of funny. I was watching Arnold Schwarzenegger's Snapchat story. I think it was last June, and he was behind the scenes at the Arnold's, and he's talking about all the bodybuilders behind him. And then I look, and it's you behind him pumping up backstage. So yep. I was wondering if you could tell me the story of your experience at the Arnold's.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's my hometown, Columbus, Ohio, and it was a dream come true for me. I had so many people showed up to support me, and it was pretty cool. The crowd went nuts, and I don't mind saying I was in really good condition. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we're backstage, and Arnold comes back with his crew, and he's walking around talking to people, and of course they're filming everything, and then same thing you saw. I was next day or a couple of days later, somebody was like, "Hey, have you seen this?" And I looked, and I was like, "Oh wow, that's me in the background." But he was back there just joking around. He's like a real lighthearted guy. He's always joking around, and he's just back there just encouraging people, get some more blood in your arms, It was really cool. It was really cool. I used to train one of his bodyguards, so I used to see him quite a bit. I'm not inferring that I have a personal relationship with him because he doesn't know me from Adam, but I used to see him a lot. And, but it's still, every time I see him, he's still got the same happy-go-lucky attitude. He's still super friendly. I mean, he's still a bodybuilder at heart. He always has been. He always will be. I mean, and you can tell he really, really cares about the sport. And obviously he's been very outspoken the last year or two about his beliefs and where the sport's headed.
Hmm.
So it's pretty cool, you know?
Yeah, that's super cool. I was watching it and I was like, that is hilarious. Because I was like, I gotta watch the Arnolds now because John's competing.
Yeah.
So, talking about competing, you said you've been in the industry for a long time, competing for a long time. What's one of the toughest moments you've had during a contest prep?
Oh man, I've competed somewhere around 60 times, and I honestly lost count. And I've had a lot of tough times. I guess when you asked me that, the first thing that popped into my head was 2005, because in 2005 I had a disease that I didn't know it at the time, but it was slowly killing me, and I ended up I was preparing for the Mr. USA, and I was having some problems, a lot of pain in my stomach, pain that would literally like put me on the ground and make me cry.
Hmm.
And turns out I had a disease, and I had to get rushed into emergency surgery. I had my entire colon removed. Some people know that about me, some don't. It was a pretty big story, back then. And I had my entire colon removed, and I had another 5 surgeries after that. And people kind of thought, yeah, well, he's done with bodybuilding. And then I turned around, 10 years later, and I get my pro card. And I think it's a pretty cool story. So that was tough. And I was in California competing, I remember, before the USA. And I remember all the problems were sitting in. I remember I went out there by myself because my wife's mom and dad were having their like 50th wedding anniversary. So she was with her parents, and I had to go by myself. So I kind of quarantined myself into this hotel room, and I was just sitting in the bathroom, just in pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking, man, I'm going to die by myself in a hotel in California. And like, I couldn't wait to get home. And somehow, so basically I just quit eating. And because anytime I would eat even the slightest bit of food, it would cause extreme pain. So I just basically quit eating. I did a show. I flew home. And then I had the USA a week later. And I basically didn't eat for that whole week. And I just thought, well, it's just contest stress. It'll be fine once the show's over. Well, the show ended and I flew back and I wasn't fine. And I was trying to force myself to eat little bits. I got sicker and sicker. The next thing I know, I'm in the ambulance, getting rushed to the hospital. And I get there, and I ended up making several trips to the emergency room. But the last one, I was in a situation where I was bleeding to death. And so they rushed me into surgery. And so anyways, you asked me what a tough time was. That was a tough time.
Yeah, that's super tough. So how's your diet had to change since you got your colon removed?
Well, I never had colitis, which is extremely common with bodybuilders. And when you have colitis, you have to be much more selective about your food choices. I actually had a vascular disease, and I can eat anything I want. I just don't have much transit time. Since I don't have a colon, food goes through me quicker. So I can eat anything I want. Some foods go through me quicker than others, so I just need to know where the bathroom is, basically.
I see. So I guess there was that the little bit of recovery. So how long was it before you competed again after that incident?
Well, the next year I competed. And then the year after that, I tried to compete, but I had a condition called diastasis recti. It's what pregnant women get, where their linea alba kind of doesn't function, and their abs, start pulling apart. And my abs were pulling apart, and I did a contest, and it just looked horrible.
Mm-hmm.
And it looked awful. And then luckily I got referred to a really good surgeon, and he literally pulled my abs together and sewed them together. Like, my abs are literally sewn together to hold in place.
Huh.
So I had years and years of pain and tingling. in my abdominal area, particularly my lower abdominal area, where it felt like pinpricks from all the nerve damage I had. I didn't start getting feeling back in my abs until the year I won my pro card. So 9 or 10 years after my surgeries. That's how long it was.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
So you're like a warrior then, eh?
I think I've been through some battles. Yeah.
So how has your training philosophy changed over the past like 5 to 10 years?
Well, you know, I'm very, very passionate about training. And I feel very strongly that there's a lot of bad information on training that's out there. I feel like I see all these comments from people like, people make it too complicated. All you got to do is squat, bench, and deadlift. To really remember the audience I'm working with. Remember, I'm working with people who want their pro card or they're already a pro. Or if they're not a pro or something like that, they still want to develop to the maximum.
Mm-hmm.
To get the maximum out of your body, it actually is kind of complicated. And what's complicated about it is you got to know when you can push really hard and you got to know when to back off. I mean, anybody can go in and beat themselves into the ground and then put themselves in a state of overtraining, or, CNS fatigue, all that stuff. And anybody can go in and not train hard for fear of overtraining. It's the art of being able to know when to push on the gas, when to pull back on the gas. It's knowing when to how to feel exercises. People get so wrapped up on moving the weight from point A to point B, they forget to even how to do the exercise. I see people doing a chest press, and it just looks like a tricep lockout. And I'm like, why aren't you flexing your chest? Like, well, I didn't know you had to. I mean, that's like 101 to me. And that's what I've always been really good at, is I always could figure out ways to do an exercise where I could really feel it in the target muscle. Because at the end of the day, that's what you want. You want to feel things in the target muscle. And this is why, like, you see people say beginners should never do isolation work. It should be all compound work. That's absolutely awful advice. Oh, sorry, let me turn this on. That's absolutely awful advice. A beginner should work on compound movements, and they should learn movement patterns and learn how to do them safely. But they should also work with isolation movements so they know what it feels like to feel certain muscles work. And because I think that's a key to it. If you want muscle growth, if you don't care, then yeah, fine, just do compound movements. But I think the combination of compound movements and isolation movements is very important. And I think as you get older and older and older, then you have longevity factors. Now it's, okay, when do you do the compound movements? Do you do them first or do them last? Or do them in the middle of your workout? And then exercise sequence starts to become a really big deal. Like for me, for example, I told you I love incline barbell presses. Well, there's no way I'd go into the gym and load it up and do that as my first exercise now. I'd tear something or I'd pull something. But I can do it second or I can do it third. Mm-hmm. And so then, longevity starts to become really important. So when you train for a long time, there's an inevitable change that should happen in my mind. And you see, like, a lot of the pros now that are out of the sport, all the injuries they have and how just they're in wheelchairs or they're in surgeries all the time. I think a lot of that could have been prevented if they just knew how to back off. And it's funny because what made them great, their ability to push, is also what put them out of the sport. Mm-hmm. So, at some point, if some of the people that suffered major injuries would have just been a little more intelligent about their training, they could have extended their time in the sport another 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. We'll never know. But I'm just speculating because I know if I went in and tried to do the same things that I did in my 20s, it would be a matter of weeks before I'd have multiple torn body parts and I wouldn't even be able to go to the gym. I'd be so hurt.
Mm-hmm. I actually remember hearing a story of Frank Zane saying that he did thousands of reps for his abs, but someone asked him if there was one thing you could change in your training, what would it be? And he said, not doing as many reps for my abs because it kind of put me out of the sport.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly what happened to him or anything, but yeah, I mean, a lot of the lessons I learned, Jason, I learned them the hard way. So, like, I used to do all my barbell work first. I did my chest, and I had strain after strain after strain. And then one time it was severe enough to where I had the black and blue chest,
Oh.
and I was like, okay, I'm dangerously close to having a full pec tear here. So I'm not going to bench first anymore. And I started changing my training around. And the crazy thing was, when I did those movements second or third, I actually felt them a million times better than the target muscle and not so much connective tissue. Felt so much better and actually grew faster. It was just a better approach in general, you know?
Hmm. So we covered the past 5 to 10 years, but what would you say is the most impactful training principle you've learned in the past year?
In the past year, it's been definitely knowing when to pull back even more.
Hmm.
I mean, I've known that for a while now, but I'm continuing to add mileage to to myself. So I'll give you an example. I had my shoulders were starting to hurt. They were getting banged up. I like to do my chest on Mondays and Fridays. So I get a lot of deep tissue work done too. I get it done every Tuesday and Friday year round. And it really helps me. It really helps me a lot. But even with all the deep tissue work, and even though she was doing her best to keep me in one piece, my shoulders were just throbbing. I went to incline, and as I was lowering the bar, I could just feel my arm shaking and pain going through my shoulders.
Hmm.
So I that Friday I took the next 2 Fridays and I changed it to another leg workout instead of a chest and shoulder workout. And lo and behold, 2 weeks later, my shoulders feel like a new pair of shoulders. So, you'll have guys that'll just say, just work through it, just push, be hardcore. And then you tear your body up. And so sometimes, I mean, sometimes you got to just, I know this is cliche, but you got to listen to your body. And particularly when it's joints and connective tissue and things like that. I was doing some leg presses probably about 4 months ago, and I felt a little pop on the side of my leg, and it didn't feel real bad, but it was a signal to me like stop right now, because if you do one more rep, then you will have a bad injury.
Hmm.
So I stopped. I was racked the weight. I said that's it. I'm done for the day, and it took like 3 weeks, and then I was back to. It took 3 or 4 weeks, but then I was back to normal. Now it's fine. If I would have done one extra rep, look at what that could have done to me. That could have gave me a major tear, and I could have been out for 6 months. So, when I feel something that doesn't feel right, it's not a matter of pain. I can deal with a lot of pain, but when something doesn't feel right, I'll stop. I'll change exercises. I'll live to fight another day, because you're always one injury away from not being able to train. And so I'm very, very thoughtful about what I'm doing and listening to my body. It's very important.
Hmm. It's if you look at it logically, it makes sense. Like, what's better, being off for 3 weeks so you don't get injured, or getting injured and being off for 6 months? It's pretty obvious when you look at it that way.
Yeah, and I hear people, saying, well, you can't train scared and things like that. I'm like, it's not a matter of training scared. When you get an injury, come give me that speech when you get an injury, because I guarantee you'll say, I wish I'd have pulled back a little.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, for sure. So, I guess about 6 weeks ago, maybe 2 months ago, I got an email from you, and you were mentioning Mountain Dog Training 2.0. And it got me really interested, and I was like, I got to get John on the interview so I could talk to him about that. So I was wondering if you can go into a bit of detail about that.
yeah, it's a high frequency program. High frequency has been around forever. It's not a new theory or a new practice. It's been around forever. But I don't think it's been implemented in bodybuilding very well. Bodybuilding has always been do a body part one time a week, or then Ronnie Coleman's, would say 2 times a week. And that was really it. I mean, that was kind of the only splits that people do in bodybuilding. You do it once a week or twice a week. And there's a lot of pretty impressive data. I'm trying to remember now. It came out of one of the Scandinavian countries. Um, but I thought this is another way to get past plateaus because you can only train so hard, and you can only train for so long in a session. So to me, it's like, well, how can I continue to progress? We had to find a way to train the body part more often. Now, a lot of people, I think when they hear high frequency, they just assume your whole body, right? But I believe that in bodybuilding, you can only do that with one or two body parts at a time. Like, you can't say, okay, I'm going to train my whole body 4 times a week. You don't have an unlimited amount of recovery. You just flat out can't recover from all that work. So, in my opinion, you have to pull out work from your stronger body parts, which, by the way, your strong body parts never go away. They're always going to be good. And then allow your body to recover the weaker body parts that you're training with higher frequency. Um, so if you wanted to do a high frequency block for your legs, you might do them Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Now, high frequency, even if you're pulling back on your other body parts, is still really hard. And the body will still get beat up. So 4 to 6 week blocks is what I feel is about the appropriate amount of time to do a high frequency block. So if I'm going to do legs, I'm going to do it for 4 to 6 weeks. Personally, I do them for 4. Then if I'm going to do my chest, I'll do it for 4. The one body part that I think can handle a little bit longer is your back. Your back just has so many different muscles in it. There's skills you can train at. I think it can 6 weeks. So you focus on one area for 4 weeks, and then you change the focus on another area for 4 weeks, and then you change the focus to another area, or you go back to what you did the first time. But the key to it, Jason, is 1 or 2 body parts only, 3 times a week, 4 weeks, and then you come out and you do something else. And I have seen people just have crazy, crazy results training this way. And but that's my version of high frequency training, and that's what I was launching when you saw it.
Cool. So knowing you, you'd have like probably a heavy day, then a pumping day, and then what would like the third day be?
Yeah, so when you do high frequency, you got to be careful. I have people use an RPE chart, a rate of perceived exertion chart, because it's crazy. You can't have them going all out, like say to a 10 or to failure on all their sets. So you have to manage the number of sets they're truly taking to failure, because if you're taking all your sets to failure Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, it's just too much. It's just too much. So I might have Monday, I might have them take more sets to failure than Wednesday, very little, more pumping, as you'd say. Then Friday, I might do even more pumping, or I might come back and I might do a little bit more sets to failure. Like if you said, the interesting thing about those studies is the high frequency studies, they were spreading the current volume. They weren't increasing it. So let's say you did your back Mondays and Fridays, and you did 15 sets each day. So that's a total of 30 work sets during the week. Mm-hmm. So if you're just going to spread that volume and increase your sessions, you would do, say, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Now you got 3 sessions, but you would do 10 sets per session. So you're still at 30. You're just doing 10, 10, and 10 instead of 15 and 15. So it's the stimulus, but you're actually keeping the volume the same. So what I do is I wanted to emphasize that. I spread the volume. I don't necessarily you don't increase the volume. It's just the frequency. It's more stimulation for the muscle. Mm-hmm. But you got to be careful with how far you take sets in terms of failure. So that's what you got to really kind of get a skill at. I have my thoughts on it. Like if you were doing something Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, what would be the session where you'd have the most rest? It'd be the Friday, right? Because you'd have Saturday and Sunday to rest. Mm-hmm. So I'd probably make Friday the hardest day, knowing that I had Saturday and Sunday to rest, because on Monday, you're only going to have Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, you're only going to have Thursday. Then you're back on Friday.
Exactly.
So I look at the days where you're going to have the most rest, and those are the days that you structure to be the hardest. And the days that have the least rest are the days that are structured more towards pumping.
Okay, I see. Makes a lot of sense. Um,
It really, when you think about it, it's just common sense. I mean, it's just to keep you from beating yourself to the ground.
exactly. So you can recover and ultimately grow.
Hmm.
So let's do a 180 and let's talk about something that happened last year. Your fallout with Prime Nutrition. Can you tell me the story behind that?
Yeah, it was a very, very unfortunate situation. Um, my good friend Evan Sitapani told me he was joining with Prime Nutrition, and Evan is someone who I really respect and I like him a lot. So I said, "Hey, man, I want in on the action." So I called the owner of the company, said, "Hey, I talked to Evan, and I'm kind of looking for a little change in my life right now." At the time, I'd been working with Biotest, who I have a great relationship with. I mean, I still talk to those guys now. I had been with Biotest for probably 3 or 4 years, and they treated me very good. Um, they paid me on time. They took real good care of me. So, but I was just kind of like, you know what? I want to do something a little new, and I wanted to do something where I could build some formulas because I felt like I had some formulas that would be very beneficial. So I went to Prime and I said, "Hey, I'd love to work with you guys." And they were like, "Okay, well, what do you want?" And I said, "Look, I'd really like to, I'd like to do some formulas for you, and I would like for my compensation to be part of the percentage of the residual. I want residual income. I want a percent of the sales on the back end." So they agreed. They said, "Okay, yeah, great, sure." They gave me a very low starting salary under the premise that they were a new company, and I get that. I had no issues with that at all.
Hmm.
But I knew that when people would try my formula, I knew they'd like it. I knew they would work. So I was very confident that I would do well on the back end. So that's how the relationship started. And then it kind of deteriorated. It was, I never got paid that permission or that commission that I was promised. And I was continually asking, "Hey guys, we talked about this. Here's the email. It says it right here." No, John, no, no, no. Well, we would like to. And then it was, well, make more products for us, make us more money, and then we'll pay you a commission. And I thought, man, that sounds a little odd. Um, I got to make you even more money to get paid a little bit. But I did it. I said, okay, I got a couple more formulas in mind. So I did it, and they did pay me part of that commission. I was supposed to get paid commission for all of the units, and they end up only paying me for what was on the internet. So they really pretty much lied to me again then, and it just got worse and worse, and then the one of the owners obviously called me lazy, and anybody that knows me, they kind of heard that and just shook their head like he just dug his own grave. Everybody knows you're not lazy.
Hmm.
And by the way, in every relationship I have with every other company is impeccable. With my relationship with Best Bar and with Iron Rebel and with Biotest, if you call any of those guys, they'll tell you I'm the easiest person to work with. And I legitimately add a lot of sales when I come on board. So then I started hearing people saying that my product was making them sick, meaning sick to their stomach. They were drinking it and they were getting diarrhea and they were bloating.
Hmm.
And I thought something's wrong because cluster dextrin is the easiest form of carbohydrate to. I mean, it doesn't even really require digestion. It's low osmolarity. It's high molecular weight. I mean, that stuff just boom. It goes in and does its thing. It doesn't jack your insulin up because it doesn't give you a big blood sugar rise. So I kind of knew something was wrong at that point, but it is expensive. So I figured that they had taken that out and they were going to start dumping dextrose in it, because dextrose will make you sick to your stomach,
Oh
particularly
yeah.
if you're drinking 60 or 70 grams of dextrose at once and thinking it's brain cyclic dextrin. Yeah, you're going to have stomach problems. So I ended up, long story short, I ended up getting the products tested with my name on it. I paid money out of my own pocket to do it, and they failed miserably. And that's something that you just can't sit on that. You just can't ignore that. So I did a test And then to be sure, I mean, that's a pretty big statement. If you're going to come out on social media and say, hey, this is happening, that's a pretty big deal. So you better have your ducks in a row. So I ran a second test, results again. So I had multiple tests done by one of the best testing companies in the United States. The results were infallible. And I presented what I found. I put it in facts. I just said, here's the facts. I'm not associated with this company, period. I'm gone. And then, there was, mudslinging on their part. Well, John was lazy, and that's pretty much all they could say about me. But so it got pretty ugly. And when all that was happening, though, I had just companies from everywhere reaching out. Manufacturers were reaching out. Let us make your product. Let us make your product. And companies are reaching out saying, man, come and work for us. Be one of our athletes. And I was very, very thankful. Everybody was clearly behind me. I mean, there's one store, Natural Body, huge store in New York where I just did my grand opening. Those guys actually came out on social media, and they said, we're pulling all their products from the shelves. As far as we're concerned, John did the right thing, and we stand behind him. And it created a real sense of trust between us, and that's, as you saw, that's who I did my launch with. Mm-hmm. But people came out of the woodwork that supported me, and I just said, you know what, I'm going to do this myself. I'm going to make supplements myself. I'm going to interview manufacturers. I'm going to find out who's doing things right. Because when I started with Prime, I really didn't know the manufacturing side of the business. I didn't know who any of the manufacturers were. I didn't know what kind of games were being played on the back end, but I know now. Mm-hmm. So I understand what happens in the industry. It's not pretty. And my way of fighting it is, you know what? I'm going to come out with a good product, and I'm going to give people an alternative. If they want something cheap, that's not my product's probably not for you. That's my end game is not to be the cheapest. I wanted something of the highest quality, something you could trust, something that actually worked. And so I built what I think are some very good products. And so here we are. I mean, that's kind of the progression of how that all happened.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad it kind of worked out all in the end. The good thing too is you want to have a supplement that you can take yourself and use for your own body. So having something that's super high quality that you built yourself is really important, obviously.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, man, like when I'm hearing, back when all that was about ready to boil over, I've got kids come to me saying, hey, I saved up my money and I'm buying InterMD. Just wanted to thank you. And this was like literally days before I revealed everything. I mean, I hear that and I'm thinking I was in those kids' shoes. I was raised by my grandmother. We didn't have much money. If I wanted a supplement, I had to save money and get it. For somebody to save their hard-earned money and then go buy a supplement and it doesn't even have in it what it's supposed to, I mean, that is bad. Mm-hmm. That's just really bad. So, like I said, I had no choice. It's like, yeah, I mean, I need to air the laundry here, and I know there'll be people that probably will have conspiracy theory stories and whatever, but I think all the fallout, everything proved just fine for me. So
that's good. Let's do another 180. Before the show, we were talking a bit about poker. So what's the whole story about that, and is it going to be making a comeback in your life?
Well, when I was in a hospital in 2005, I was in there for a while because I was going in and out for surgeries, and then I had infections. So all I did when I was in there was read nutrition books and poker books. And I must have read literally every poker book that was on the shelf at the time. I mean, I could calculate pot odds. I could do everything in my head so fast you wouldn't believe it. And I was a full tilt guy. I was a multi-tabler and full tilt. I was always playing 4 tables at once. And I had to do it late at night, once the kids were born in 2008. But I was playing up until they were born. So I got out of the hospital, and I had about 3 years where I was playing just constantly at night. And I really love poker. I really enjoy it. but my kids were born, and if I did have any free time, which I had very little of, it was all gone.
Hmm.
So I haven't been able to really play up until recently. I got into a couple tournaments recently, and I'm looking forward to getting back out to Vegas and playing some more out there. I always like to go out to Caesars and play at Caesars. Chances are really good I'll do the World Series this year. So I hope to be that guy at the final table this year, actually.
That's so cool. I'll be watching out for you and rooting for you.
Yeah, I actually, man, I love poker. I'm respectable at it. When I was playing on full tilt, I played in freeze out tournaments, and I had a 22% placing rate, hitting the money in freeze out tournaments. That's pretty good. Those are under 200, 500,000 people tournaments, and 22% of the time I was ending up in the money. So I just really, really enjoy poker.
That's solid. So at the end of every interview I give, I have a couple rapid fire questions that I like to ask everyone that comes on. And it's just 4 simple questions. The answer can be as long or as short as you want. So are you ready for the rapid fire?
All right, bring them on.
All right. What kind of things are you doing in your life right now to bring you happiness?
Playing with my kids. A lot.
Beautiful. It was so quick you didn't even give me a chance to drink a sip of water there.
Yeah.
What would your profession be if you weren't doing fitness?
I'd try to play poker professionally.
Cool.
Without a doubt.
And if you were to buy your 20-year-old self 2 books, one fiction and one nonfiction, what would you give yourself?
Ooh, boy. Okay, fiction would be a graphic novel of the Civil War, where Civil War in the Marvel Universe, so where Iron Man had his group of people against Captain America. Actually, you know what? I'd probably give him a graphic novel of the Infinity Gauntlet. Before all these Marvel movies came out, I was a huge Infinity Gauntlet fan. I had that graphic novel. And I was always telling all my friends, I don't know, they don't put Thanos in all these movies. And my friends were all like, who's Thanos? And now, of course, everybody knows who Thanos is now. Mm-hmm. Probably be one of those 2. Those are 2 fantastic stories. The other one was Galactus when he came to Earth with the Silver Surfer. That'd be the other one. And nonfiction, what have I read that was really impactful? Oh boy, that's a tough one. I listen to audio tapes in the car more than anything. I listen to Tony Robbins CDs more than anything, and I like what Tony Robbins says, in particular, when he talks about when bad things happen to you, they shape you and they make you a better person. Mm-hmm. And that's how I tend to view situations as well. Like when people say, man, don't you wish you never would have signed with Prime? I'm always like, no, because those things that happened put me on the path to where I am today. And I think it's so easy for people to get wrapped up and feel sorry for themselves. And the same thing with my surgeries, Don't you wish that wouldn't have happened? I'm like, nope, I'm glad it happened. It made me a better person. I just think it's so easy to get wrapped up in negativity now that you kind of forget that, I don't believe in setbacks. I believe in set-ups. So a lot of times these things happen. You might see them as a setback, but if you really reflect on it, and you may not see it at the time, but later you'll realize it was a set up for something better. Mm-hmm. It just depends on how you react to the situation and kind of the attitude you have. So I think, I would recommend to people, Tony Robbins' stuff is really good, but in particular, the thing that I really want to impress on him is we all have challenges and frustrations and setbacks, at least we think they are, but change your viewpoint. And when you start doing that, it's real interesting, the dynamic that happens and how much better you feel, how much more positive you feel. And, you can talk about things freely because you don't have quite as much emotion into it. You're not as mad and angry. You can just talk, That's what I'm thinking.
Cool. And last but not least, where can people learn more about you and your companies?
Yeah, so I have two websites. Mountaindogdiet.com is my website that has a membership plan for people. It's been up for 7 years. It has 7 years worth of data that's been loaded up on it, interviews, articles, everything you can think of. Tons of workout routines, tons of awesome articles on nutrition and training, pre-contest plans on what I've done with athletes I've coached down to the T. And then also my new supplement company is granitesupplements.com. And and also on social media, I'm kind of an Instagram fanatic. I really enjoy Instagram. I just think it's fun. So Mountain Dog One on Instagram, and then on Facebook, it's just my name, John Meadows.
Very cool. Well, John, thanks so much for coming on. I've actually had a really great time talking to you about this stuff, because this is stuff I wanted to sit down and talk to you about for a long time now. So thanks so much for coming on.
You bet. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So guys, Jason Maxwell here from JMax Fitness with John Meadows, and I'll be seeing you guys next time.